Good morning everyone, and thank you for joining me here today. Really appreciate you taking the time to read the report before you came in and for sending through some feedback. In particular, you may recall we split this into two. So originally we started off with some really lofty goals to achieve in quite a short space of time. We identified that we're really coming from a place of success with many years of stable, reliable systems, positive feedback from the business, and even some steps in terms of innovation along the way. We broke that into two when we were looking at it because of these symptoms that I guess we've been seeing along the lines of increases in shadow IT on the back of a lot of complexity in our IT division, supporting many more systems, and really our people telling us they don't have time to improve or take on those new pieces of work. The two pieces we moved into were looking at how we're making IT decisions. The other side of it was really, do we have the right people, the right mix, the right numbers, and even in the right teams to enable us to support the business and keep them thriving. The main focus of the report was on the IT governance side. With the time we had and some of the initial findings, we did split off the staff side to some extent. We've got the board meeting coming up shortly, at which time we'll be reviewing the budget and the numbers, and at that point we'll probably spend some more time looking at our staffing structure. I have added a little bit more at the end based on your feedback as to some high level things we should consider. First and foremost though, the recommendations from the report. As discussed, it's really looking at establishing that formal IT committee. There's some structure already, but really putting that into place. Having them own, in particular, that IT principles and IT investment decisions that was identified during the report as being the areas of most opportunity to improve. We did, of course, look then at mechanisms. So how do we actually communicate, enforce, encourage people to stick with these principles and these governance decisions? From those initial discussions with yourselves, I did pick up on probably a key mantra, I guess. At the moment, we're very good at BAU, the keeping the lights on. We're fairly good at picking up projects. Once we know something, we're good at implementing. The third piece, I guess, that came out that we're struggling with is that collaboration. So that consultative IT is the term that we've been using. So how do we move from that BAU and project-driven basis and structure into allowing that consultative approach to come in? The objectives of this report were to review whether WorkCover has effective IT decision-making processes that really enable us to align with the business strategy. To achieve that, we wanted to look at what are the existing IT governance structures and processes at WorkCover, where there might be some gaps, and thirdly, how can we improve these? To achieve this, we looked at the model of Wheel and Ross. Wheel and Ross proposed 5 key IT governance decisions, those being principles, architecture, infrastructure, applications, and then IT investment decisions themselves. Throughout the report, you would have seen that the middle three, architecture, infrastructure, and applications, are all perceived fairly positively. Existing processes are in place, and there are limited concerns about the delivery of those items. It's the first and last key decisions that were identified as problem areas, or areas of opportunity, if you will, that being principles and investment decisions. It was interesting to see the IT management response in terms of the principles. When given a blank slate, there was a surprising consistency in the areas of data, availability, structure, services, everything quite stable, really reflecting that keep the lights on approach of many years. What was interesting to note was the business strategy of customer-centric, customer experience were not there. The desire to innovate was barely a mention. We do talk about agile development, as we've been using that for our in-house software delivery for quite some time. But when it comes to our infrastructure and support side of the IT division, very much around security, stability, and availability, all key things for any IT department, however not aligning with those strategic directions of the business. Fortunately, we are in a good place in terms of structure to enable that governance to be applied. We have a CIO who sits at the executive table with good influence and formal power in that position. That allows us to make those business monarchy level decisions described by Wheel and Ross, that we're involved not just as a duopoly, but as a key player at the table. To inform those decisions, it is most definitely a duopoly. We want IT partnering with each area to inform, taking that to that executive table to allow effective decision making. That was one of the key recommendations of that initial report. That being, establish those principles with the business, bring the business strategies into those principles, inform people, give them guiding structures as to what IT investments they should make. For instance, should we always be considering on-premise first? Is data really our key concern? Or should we be thinking about a customer-centric approach that no matter how they come in, they're always getting that same experience we can pick up from one channel onto the next? What are those key principles? Work with the business and together establish those to inform everyone when they're making decisions. Once that's all established, that committee needs to communicate, and it needs to start from the top. That's where we want the CEO to lead off with the new process, the new structure, the new committee, informing the business of its existence. And then to continue with informing outcomes, decisions, processes established by that committee in partnership with the CIO, who should be the chair, at least in the initial stages. Then to step back and allow the heads of digital and infrastructure and support to take a leading role on that committee, while they take those decisions up to the executive table and help inform the rest of the exec group. One element I haven't touched on, which is in the report, is that of exception management when it comes to governance. There needs to be a release valve. If we have strict rules and guidelines to help people make good investment decisions and align with strategy, we also need to allow that experimentation. We need to allow the pressure to come off and avoid people going alone, establishing shadow IT processes and taking on cloud services we become aware of well down the track. However, I do think exception management is a key component that needs to be reviewed separately. Being aware at this time and having that on the agenda for this committee group to look at, and looking in with project teams as to how can that be introduced into both the business as usual operations as well as projects and even that consultancy level. How do we enable while still ensuring appropriate governance? So I'm looking today for you to give me that approval and that support that we're going to establish that committee by 1 July, have the first meeting in July, and start communication from the CEO down in August, with principles being rolled out as the first step, reinforcing the 3 next key decisions around architecture, infrastructure and applications, and ultimately aiming to establish clear and transparent IT investment decision processes where any department, no matter how small or how big at the organisation, can follow the same rules, the same processes to get effective outcomes for their ideas. Finally, I did want to take this chance to discuss briefly the staffing, the structure, how do we get towards this consultative idea while still managing the BAU and projects. I refer to the ambidextrous strategy, that is, exploit versus explore. While sometimes this can be a structural change, it can also be introduced in theory within existing teams. Ultimately looking at the explorative side, trying new things, which may tie into that exception management side, but really it's that innovation. Looking, can we replace, can we improve? While the other side, the exploit, takes what we know and makes it run as effectively and efficiently as possible. This structure can allow us to look at issues in different ways, breaking down components and passing it to the appropriate people or teams. This can be informed further by something such as the Kenefin framework, which allows us to break down the complex and the complicated and try and manage them in the appropriate ways, both in an explorative and an exploitative way. Once we have that exploit and explore process, we really need to encourage our people. The most effective way to manage this outside of 2 standard teams or structural teams would be through informal networks and informal leadership coming forward, enabling people who have the ideas, the knowledge, the background or the desire to get involved in these projects to step up and lead them, with management support and monitoring as always. This way we can have a IT division that knows how to run BAU, keep the lights on, deliver on projects for improvement or upgrades or patching, and ultimately look at collaborating with the business on innovative ideas that we can test, trial, and if successful, move into that exploitative stage. Thank you again for your time in reading the report, giving me good feedback. I acknowledge the feedback in particular about the lack of desire around relationship managers working between the departments. That is something I had been considering. I appreciate the experience of both our CIO and our head of infrastructure and support, who have worked in these kind of structures in the past and have expressed their desire not to go down that path. So I've modified those recommendations and we'll talk further about the staffing after the board meeting in 19th of June. Thanks again.